So I am going to be talking about TBS, better known as Trabecular Bone Score, and how adding it to DEXA can help improve your patient's bone health assessments. So really quickly, I just want to give you an introduction or a meet and greet to Medimaps as a company. We've been in business for well over 10 years. We were actually founded by a physicist who has and a professor who has extensive experience in the bone health field. And we are a Swiss-based company, but we're actually building out our US organization, and we've expanded quite a lot actually in the last year. So our software was FDA approved in 2014. And, throughout that time, we've made, some improvements, especially with, FRAX and reimbursement as well. So, I'll be talking a little bit more about those two aspects as we go through the presentation. But I just want to kind of give you an overview of who Medimaps is as a company. We're not just like a brand new AI, company that just started. We've been around for a really long time. We have really deep roots in the bone health community, and we have around over 1,400 peer-reviewed publications that validate our technology as a tool for assessing a patient's bone health and fracture risk. So you may be thinking, okay, what is TBS? I've never heard of it before. I'm going to teach you about it today, but are there anybody, who is using the technology? How are they using it? Like, where is TBS in the US? So this is just a list of some of the customers that are utilizing Trabecular Bone Score and have been for quite a while. A lot of these places utilize TBS as a standard of care. So any patient that gets a DEXA gets a TBS. And as I walk through the presentation and explain to you the clinical value of TBS, you'll understand why that is. So let's just start as we root ourselves in the ground truth about osteoporosis as a whole, right? So what is osteoporosis, and what is the definition? So the World Health Organization defines osteoporosis as a silent systemic skeletal disease that is categorized by both low bone mass and microarchitectural distortion. And you're thinking, okay, what is microarchitectural distortion? I've heard about lone bone mass. We've been doing DEXA and bone density for over 30 years. And that's how we've typically categorized osteoporosis in the United States and around the world for that time. But there is this other aspect of microarchitectural distortion, which is really just talking about the structure of the bone, right? So we have normal bone, right? So, and this is the bone that's in if you were to take a cross section of your bones, there's a spongy type of material within the bone, and that's the trabecular bone. And that really provides the structure and the support for your cortical bone, which is the outside of the bone. So you can have normal structure of the bone, and as you lose bone, you become osteopenic, and that spongy material becomes a little bit more porous. And then as you get osteoporosis or a weakening or lessening of your bone density, that structure can be more weak, and then it tends to deteriorate much faster. So by looking at both bone mineral density and trabecular bone score, we're able to evaluate a patient's true risk of fracture, because here's the catch. Bone mineral density tells you the quantity of bone within your body, so the density, right, or how much bone you have. And over time, you can lose your bone mass or bone quantity. But there hasn't been until now a way to talk about or look at your bone structure, right? So what's the strength of your bones? Because technically, you can have a large quantity of bad bone, or deteriorating bone, right? And that's a bad thing, right? But for a long time, we haven't been able to look at that. So we've only been able to diagnose based on the quantity of bone, not the quality of the actual bone. So now if you combine bone mineral density and TBS, you're actually able to assess both of those aspects for your patients and give them a true indication of their fracture risk. And this is in this example of a patient kind of talks a little bit about what the importance of understanding a patient's bone quality, right? So these are two patients, and they both have the same T-score, right? So for a long time, we understand T-score, right? That tells us if we have normal bones, if we have osteopenic bones, or if we have osteoporosis, right? And that's what we've been using for a really long time to diagnose and treat any type of bone health issues. So these two patients have the same T-score. So they technically have osteopenia. Okay, and then we added the TBS software to both of their DEXAs. In patient A, they had great trabecular bone, so they were good. So they are a true osteopenic patient. Patient B had degraded TBS. That means that they're a higher risk of fracture. So this patient actually gets recategorized as being osteoporotic. So now instead of having this patient go off and say, okay, you have osteopenia, we'll take a look at your bone density in a couple years, try to, change your lifestyle, try to maybe do some weight-bearing exercises, try to take calcium. Now this patient is actually going to be recommended for pharmacological type of treatment. So they can do like an anabolic or an anti-resorptive or whatever the doctor feels is necessary for this patient to help prevent the progression of their deterioration of their trabecular bone. And this is the gray area of bone health. Osteopenia is a tough one because we know that you don't have normal bones anymore, but we also know that you don't have osteoporosis yet. So what do we do with these patients, right? And this is where TBS is extremely helpful because it's going to help you categorize patients that are actually at a true risk of fracture. So let's just talk a little bit about the workflow. So right now for bone mineral density, when you're assessing bone health to obtain a T-score, you are preparing the patient, you are taking an image, and you're getting a result. That takes all of maybe like 15 or 20 minutes. When we add the TBS, it's literally just a mouse click. So the software installs on the DEXA system. We use the lumbar spine scan, so L1 through L4. We apply an algorithm to analyze the spine, and that gives us our report. And I'll go over the output of the report too later on in the presentation. So there is no additional scan time. There's no additional radiation because we're already using the scan that you've already performed. It's really easy to install. It takes about an hour. It's done remotely and it runs locally on your DEXA workstation. So you don't need like any special, servers or any special IT. The report is really easy to interpret. It gives you both the BMD results and the FRAX. And then you can save, print, or export the report. You can export it to PACS or you can print it out as well. And we're identifying more patients at risk. So this is what the output of the report looks like. So you're saying, okay, we're doing BMD. Now we're going to add this TBS software. We're going to figure out what's going on with the patient's bone quality. We're taking a look at the spine. It's going to give us our results. And then what do I do with it? So this gives you all the information from the output of the software. So right here, you can see the mapping of the spine. So this determines the pattern and texture of the bone, and that tells us where it's weakening. And then we're able to graph it under number 2. And then under number 3, this is probably the most important part of the report. So what the software does is it takes the results of the algorithm that tells us what the bone quality is, and it matches it up with what the BMD T-score is. And it tells us the patient's true risk of fracture. So here we have a patient, and this is really small too, so sorry, and I wish I could make it a little bit bigger, but I'm sorry that I can't right now. But I'd be happy to send a copy of this out to everyone after the presentation. But basically what it's doing is it's cross-referencing the results of the TBS and the BMD, and it's saying, okay, based on the TBS and based on the T-score, this patient is at a high risk of fracture. So anything in orange or red recategorizes you as being high risk. Now, we take the results of the TBS and we apply them to the FRAX, so the 10-year fracture risk. And we also apply them to the T-score, which then adjusts the T-score for TBS. So we adjust the FRAX score and we adjust the BMD score based on the results of the TBS. And a lot of times what will happen, especially in osteopenic patients, is they might be on the border, and then the TBS results would kind of push them over into the therapeutic level, which would then warrant their provider to put them on a therapy to improve their bone health. So this is pretty much what you would get from a clinical standpoint for the TBS plus the BMD. Now, if you're looking at just providing this service, as a add-on for your clients to say, okay, we have the ability to do the scan, and you can take this report then to your provider, your primary care physician, your endocrinologist, whomever. That's absolutely fine as well. This is all the information that provider would need in order to make a clinical decision based on the scan that you've performed for that patient. And we can talk about that a little bit later if you have questions about like how to manage this from a services point of view. So this is a really interesting slide. So this shows us where the majority of osteoporotic fractures happen. And what we found from this study, which was really interesting, is the majority of osteoporotic fractures happen in women who are categorized by BMD alone as having normal or osteopenic BMD. And 50% of that cohort, and 50% of those fractures happen in the osteopenic zone. So we're going to say to ourselves, okay, I would think that the majority of fractures would happen with folks that are categorized by T-score as being osteoporotic, but the majority happen in this area. And why is that? Why are 70% of fragility fractures occurring in women who are non-osteoporotic by BMD alone? And the reason being is that we're not looking at the bone quality and the trabecular bone. Now, the trabecular bone is the most metabolically active bone in the body, and it's affected by a lot of things. There are a lot of types of medications that people take, like let's just say GLP-1s and like all other kinds of medication, PPIs, and like all these different things that people take every day or very, very frequently that can cause the bone to deteriorate. There's also a lot of different medical conditions that can also cause this as well, like kidney issues, celiac disease, like all these different types of conditions that can also cause bone loss. Those two things are called secondary osteoporosis. And a lot of times patients are missed because their physicians are saying, okay, well, maybe, I know that the risk factors are women over the age of 65, women that are postmenopausal, men that are over the age of 65. And that's kind of where they keep their head at and saying, okay, I'm going to screen those people because they fit into the box of, okay, you're aging or you're having these hormone issues. Now you're going to go and get a bone health assessment. Whereas if you're also taking these drugs and you have these conditions, you are also at risk. So there's a huge gap in the screening where I think all of you can probably help because you're doing a lot of, comprehensive, more like functional type of holistic look at the patient's overall health. And you're going to be catching a lot of patients that are probably at risk that their regular physicians are missing. So that's kind of why I think that's my take on it. That's why a lot of these patients are still fracturing, because we're not looking at their total risk and we're not assessing them properly. So let's just talk about osteopenia again. So again, this is a tricky one. There are more people with osteopenia than they are with osteoporosis. And let's just talk about the facts of osteoporosis really quick. 1 in 2 women will get osteoporosis in their lifetime, and 1 in 3 men will get osteoporosis in their lifetime. So it's a huge epidemic, and there are more people with osteopenia than there are with osteoporosis. So those are really big numbers. But when we add TBS and we start looking at the quality of the bone, around 30% of osteopenic patients are then recategorized as being high risk. And the reason, again, being is that we're looking at that bone quality. We're figuring out what's going on the inside of the bone. We're not just looking at density or quantity. So we're able to give a more comprehensive assessment of the patient's true risk, especially in that gray area of bone health known as osteopenia. So this just looks at a little bit about, the clinical value of TBS. So we just talked about it. We've been looking at density for a really long time. That only tells half the story, right? We need to be looking at the quality of the bone. The quality of the bone is just as important as the quantity of bone. So these are a couple quotes from some of our thought leaders, but this really tells us a patient's true risk of fracture. There are so many patients that get assessed with BMD that walk out the door that have a high risk. And what ends up happening is a couple years go by and they have no idea that their bones are degrading and they have a fracture and they're like, what the heck happened? Like, I didn't think I'd ever, fall down or, hurt myself. And then I end up fracturing a bone and they're like, what's going on? And then they're told, oh, you had an osteoporotic fracture. What the heck? I've never been diagnosed with osteoporosis in my life. So we're really helping to kind of fill that gap in the diagnosis. So we're identifying more patients at risk. We're also able to fine-tune therapy decisions, which is really important. So we talk a lot about like bone health and improving your bones and preventing future bone loss, right? A lot of these drugs that are out there now, some of them are really great. And I think they've come a long way since like the Fosamax days. But a lot of them have side effects. And the good thing about TBS software is that you are able to monitor a patient and their response to therapy and figure out if the therapy is actually working or not much sooner than if you just used DEXA alone. Because again, that bone in the trabecular view is a lot more active than the cortical bone, which is being measured for bone density. Okay, so when you start a patient on a therapy after you've found them to be high risk, you're actually able to monitor them and figure out, is the treatment working? Is it not working? Do we have to pivot? Do we have to go to a different treatment? And that helps put patients' minds at ease too, because you're able to help personalize their treatment path and kind of figure it out in months versus years. So I'll go over this really, really quickly. So, again, I talked in the beginning, that we have over 1,400 peer-reviewed studies that prove the clinical value of TBS in assessing a patient's true fracture risk and their bone health, right? So again, TBS is able to predict fracture risk independent of BMD and FRAX, even though we do recategorize those two measurements based on the results that we get. But it can be able to, help in both primary and secondary osteoporosis. And then again, you can use TBS for guiding your treatment decisions and monitoring as well. And this is from the IOF, which is the International Osteoporosis Foundation. And there's a bunch more, different types of statements that talk about TBS is used in primary osteoporosis, which is, based on age and genetics. Then there's a lot of statements that talk about the treatment, the use of TBS in treatment, and how you're able to kind of figure out, the monitoring and the treatment path for your patients based on the results. And then in secondary osteoporosis, right? So all those things we talked about, all of the medications and the different types of medical conditions that can cause osteoporosis, how TBS is helpful with those as well. So I'll talk a little bit about the operational and the financial value as well. So TBS can be integrated into the DEXA workflow, and it runs automatically. So again, you're not adding more steps, you're not adding more time. Basically, you install the software on your DEXA system. There's a little box that pops up and says, do you want to add TBS? You say yes. Everything flows automatically, and then you get that report at the end. So there's no additional time for the patient or the check. You're going to be identifying more patients at risk of fracture. So what does that mean? When you identify more patients at risk of fracture and they end up going on a therapy, they're going to need to be scanned more often to monitor them. So usually a DEXA scan for BMD is done every 2 years, maybe every 5 years, just depending on the patient's age and some of their risk factors. But if you're on a therapy, you can be then scanned every year. So you're actually scanning patients more often as well. And there are reimbursement codes for TBS, but I don't know how most of you are kind of billing for services. You might just be cash pay, and we have a lot of folks that are using TBS as a cash pay service, so we can talk about that as well. So again, it's really all about how can we prevent all of those fractures that I showed you on that graph in people that have normal BMD or osteopenic BMD. How can we identify them sooner so we can get them into intervention sooner, so we can prevent further loss of bone, so we can improve their quality of life down the road, because the mortality rate of a patient over the age of 50 that breaks a hip or has a major osteoporotic fracture is much, much higher than if not. So this is really important. It's a huge gap, and it really affects all of us. So TBS is a way to really work on that preventative and improve the quality of life for patients going forward. So this is just some of the information about reimbursement. We can talk about that later. There are codes and there are things that we can discuss if you were wanting to bill for insurance. And that's it. I kind of went through it soon because I know we started fast, because I know we started late, but that's all I have for right now about TBS. So if anyone would like to ask any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Just curious, from the software integration side of things, we have a GE Prodigy, and I know through GE we can get that added on. We just didn't at the time that we started.
Okay.
Does your software independently go onto that, or it's the same as what GE would add, or how is that connected?
No, that's a great question. So we work both with GE and Logic. What you would get from GE right now would be something called a permanent license, where you would purchase a permanent license from them, and then it's the same software that we have. It would just go on your system, and then it would stay there. And it's kind of like at the time that you install it, that's the kind of version that you would have perpetually going forward. What Medimaps offers directly is a subscription. So it's the same software. It would work in the same way. It's just, it would be an annual subscription. And the benefit of that is that any upgrades or any improvements to the software that happen, you would get those automatically. And then you'll also deal with Medimaps directly for training and installation and like all of your support going forward. So while they do offer it as a point of sale type of option when you purchase a new DEXA system from them, the Medimaps option is a little bit different just because you're purchasing it directly from us, but it's the same exact software.
So it's pay over time versus a one-time lump sum. I don't know what GE charges for the TBS software. I'm going to guess it's somewhere around $20,000. Don't quote me on that. It's going to be in that ballpark. Where with this, you can actually do a monthly subscription.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a price range for this?
Alicia, hold on. They're asking
About pricing? Is that what you mean?
just the price range for the subscription or annual subscription. If you can give us a price range.
Yeah, so it's going to vary just a little bit based on each individual customer, but it's like under $10,000 per year.
Each year, so you renew every year?
Yes. Yep. And you could buy, like, if you wanted to have it for 3 years and you wanted to purchase a subscription for 3 years and just have that kind of paid for the next 3 years, you can absolutely do that too.
Okay.
Again, it depends on your system's age, if you have Windows 7 versus Windows 10, so there's all these different things, but the range is usually between like 75 and like around maybe like 8,500 per year. Just depending.
And Alicia, can you talk to what people who are charging on a cash pay basis, what they're typically charging?
Sure. So we just had a very large privately owned imaging center acquire 90 licenses, and they implemented TBS as standard of care, but they're charging cash, and they charge around $65 for it. But again, it also depends on your demographics and like where you are, and if you're going to include it as part of like an overall package, you may decide to charge a little bit different. I've seen it for $25. I've seen it all the way up to $120. So again, it just depends on your demographics and like other services you're offering in the office as well, and kind of like where this falls with that. But I'm happy to chat with anybody if you have some ideas, or if we want to talk about your overall overall services and your demographics. Happy to chat with you about that.